Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. And friends, welcome back. We are back in Calloway County with attorney Jeff Roberts. And Jeff handles an extensive amount of Social Security cases, and that's Social Security disability insurance and also the supplemental security income, the SSI side. Jeff, it's kind of uncommon to have an attorney that does personal injury, workers' comp, and Social Security, but you kind of handle all three.
I do. I handle all three of those, and they interplay among each other at times, and so handling all three of them allows me to represent one client that may have a Social Security disability and a workers' compensation claim, or a Social Security disability and a car wreck case from that standpoint, and then they just got one attorney dealing with everything, and it makes it can make it a lot easier for them and more cost effective because you have one attorney using the same medical records for two cases versus two attorneys each paying to get the medical records and basically incurring double cost.
And you're talking about cost here, so I want to hit this kind of up front. Just like personal injury, just like workers' comp, Social Security disability, for instance, is handled on a contingency fee as well. Is that correct?
It is. Social Security, I handle the Social Security disability or SSI disability cases on a contingency fee basis, which means that I get paid at the end of the case. If I am successful, then I get paid in the fee at that point in time. And just like the way I do it in workers' compensation and car wreck and other personal injury cases, I also advance the litigation expenses, and those are contingent upon recovery as well. Which means that if we are successful, I'll get paid my attorney fee and reimbursed my expenses. If we are not successful, then the client doesn't owe me any fee for services, and they also do not owe me reimbursement of expenses. So both are contingent upon recovery.
Outstanding. I always kind of like to put that out in front because some people wonder, well, if I were to call you, am I getting billed hourly and stuff? That doesn't really apply in these types of situations.
Not with me, it does
not. With you, exactly. So let's kind of talk about this big list that we have in front of us, which is a listing of impairments. And these are primarily for adults, but obviously if they impact children, it can come into play as well. But what is the list of impairments, and why is it relevant to somebody who may have a claim?
Certainly. When I talk to a potential new Social Security case, whether it's Social Security disability or SSI disability, I usually will, in talking to them, will explain to them that generally there are two ways to be successful in a Social Security disability case, and one of those is to meet what's called the listings of impairment. The listings of impairment are a set of Social Security regulations that say if you have this condition with these complications, you're automatically considered disabled by the Social Security Administration. And so it's essentially you're establishing that you meet the listings of impairment, and then the Social Security Administration should grant the disability application at that point in time. The other way is going more into restrictions that you have on you, age, education, and those things come into play on the second avenue of being found disabled. In that, your condition may meet, and actually Social Security, it's meet or equals the listings of impairment. So if you don't quite meet the criteria, but you're real close to it, or you've got conditions that kind of overlap to some extent that aren't included in the listings of impairment, but are very similar to that, then the judge can say you equal, even though you may not satisfy the explicit statements of the regulations, you equal it close enough that you're automatically disabled.
Wow. And again, this is federal. Social Security law is federal. So in this case, it pays to have somebody kind of knows how to go through the books, how to go through the rules, the regulations, and make that case or make that claim in to get this ultimately done, because this is not a fast process. We've had a number of podcast episodes about Social Security, and these can take a while.
They can take a while from that standpoint. It is, as you mentioned, it is a federal program, and it's actually the only type of case that I will handle outside of Kentucky. From that standpoint, I'm licensed to practice law in Kentucky, but the Social Security Administration has actually licensed me to practice before the Social Security Administration in all 50 states. So I can handle a Social Security case in Tennessee, and have handled Social Security cases in Tennessee multiple times. In fact, I think there's, I counted it up once, 7 or 8 different states that I've handled Social Security cases in. If you are in Hawaii and you need a Social Security attorney to come to your hearing, then please call me. I would love to be able to write that trip off of my taxes. But I do handle those type of cases outside of Kentucky. That's the only type of case I handle outside of Kentucky.
That makes sense. So let's kind of jump into this. And what we're looking at here is a list, and this list of impairments. We've got 14 different, I guess we call them categories, really. And we're going to kind of touch on them, because all of these could have an impact on whether or not you actually can file a successful claim that actually results in your receiving benefits through the Social Security Administration.
Correct. Basically, what's happened is the Social Security Administration has taken the human body and essentially divided it into 14 different categories of conditions, or that they look at from a listings of impairment standpoint. And so the first one is musculoskeletal disorders. And you get into, when you talk about that, you get into spinal issues come into play there. They also come into play in a different category as well. But people who've had low back surgeries and have complications as a result of that, or weight-bearing joint injuries to weight-bearing joints.
So a hip, a knee, something like that.
Yes, hip, knee, or
Ankle,
injuries to the lower extremities or the upper extremities, the bone structures of those, and those are what would come into play under the musculoskeletal disorder. And each one has its own separate subcategories or other things that you have to have. As I said earlier, if you've got this condition with these complications, so for low back, and frankly, these change periodically on what is required. The Social Security Administration can change the regulations and make them more stringent or less stringent, and they seem to be getting more stringent now, at least in my opinion, from that standpoint. So with for a lot of the spinal injuries, it's going to require the use of 2 canes or something of that nature, and so it gets very, very difficult to be successful, or to not necessarily be successful, but to meet some of the listings of impairment just because of the changes they've made to those.
And I guess the as we go through this list, you almost want to think of it as a structure, these injuries, and they kind of give you some categories, and it helps everybody to work through the categories, so you're not, well, this applies, yeah, but that's for something that has to do with vision, and we're talking about something that has to do with the spine, so it's unrelated. It allows everybody to be a little bit more focused on the key points and issues surrounding that type of disability.
Right. Obviously, if you've got a spine, if you've had low back fusion surgery, that doesn't affect your vision. So the vision is going to be covered in a different section. If you've got vision or hearing issues, that doesn't affect your ability to walk. So it's going to be covered in a different category. And so it's kind of, they kind of try to group body parts together, so to speak, to some extent, and then underneath that general grouping, they will have different categories under that as well. So like under 2, we kind of talked about that. That's the Social Security's title to that is special senses in speech. Well, that vision is covered under there, hearing is covered under there, and so you have these different sections, categories, and then under those categories you have like A, B, C, D type issues.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, that was a fantastic segue, by the way. I can tell you're on your 76th episode here, so you got this down. The third category, the third group of impairments would be respiratory disorders.
Correct. Yeah, respiratory disorders, and you know, a lot of folks have lung issues, breathing issues. COPD is unfortunately very prevalent in this area. From there, and so that's kind of coming into what that's talking about, the respiratory disorders, and they're getting into your how much you're able to bring in, how the oxygen, your blood is being oxygenated. So there's different ways that your lungs can be affected by different conditions, and so they're looking at the not just the volume of the lungs that you're doing, but also is it translating? Are the lungs functioning the way they're supposed to as far as getting oxygen into the blood?
Well, I know several episodes ago we talked about issues dealing with chemical harm, and sometimes you could have some chemical exposure where you've inhaled and that's damaged the lungs. So, I mean, I would think that kind of case would fall under this category.
Absolutely, that type of case that would fall under this category. Could fall under this. Asthma falls under this. Cystic fibrosis, and those type of conditions all kind of fall under the respiratory issue.
Okay, so as we continue through the list, the fourth category has to do with cardiovascular systems, and that would be obviously the heart.
Correct.
And so a lot of different issues that could happen there.
Well, yeah, the heart and the vascular system in and of itself. From there, the heart is the main part of that. In chronic heart failure, I've represented several people who've had chronic heart failure, or individuals who's had major myocardial infarctions or heart attacks in the past, who've had heart muscle damage, so the heart doesn't pump like it's supposed to pump in those, and then it gets into what the ejection fraction is. And I don't want to get into the weeds, so to speak, here with this. Each one of these has their own special things that come into play with those, but that's what you're looking at from that standpoint, and it can be other vascular type issues can also come into play to some extent in this section under category 4 for cardiovascular issues.
Okay, and then category 5, and this is one that really kind of surprised me: digestive disorders. It's not something you think about all that often, but I mean, they're out there, and sometimes they can be extremely debilitating.
They can be, and that's some people have disorders, digestive disorders, that for whatever reason, but they, because of those conditions, they lose weight very rapidly, unexpectedly, and they just can't absorb enough nutrients to allow them to function for a long period of time. And so those type of, when you have those type of gastrointestinal digestive type disorders, those can be disabling to people. And sometimes people don't realize how disabling those conditions can actually be. But Social Security does recognize some of those, and it has a separate category in some listings of impairment for those conditions.
And I guess if we were to back up to the overall picture here, again, these are conditions that could somehow limit or prohibit your ability to work. And that's what really this comes down to, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's what it comes down to from that standpoint. And they look at that. That's what they're looking at, and basically what they're saying is, historically, people who have these conditions with these complications aren't capable of working a full-time job, and so we're not even going to make them jump through the hoops of establishing that. We know if you've got these conditions with these complications that's going to prevent you from working a full-time job. Under this one as well, liver issues come into play on the digestive disorders aspect. So
so it's not just your intestines; it could also be your liver and other.
Exactly, it can be your liver in that issue as well.
Okay, the next category is genitourinary disorders, and I think as we were prepping, trying to figure out, one, how to pronounce the word, but two, also what the heck was it? It's kidney issues.
Yes, and that's primarily the different ones under this one are different types of chronic kidney diseases, essentially in the stages of those come into play. But that's what that category is primarily focused on, is kidney dysfunction, kidney diseases.
Well, I know in previous discussions that you just said, hey, these are kind of the things that allow you to skip going through the entire process. If you have these conditions and it lines up with certain factors, you're kind of going on the fast track to get approved. And I know for a fact in a previous issue you've said, the worst thing I could ever tell you is, hey, you've got a great case. That's I'm glad they can accelerate the process, but that doesn't always mean you're doing well.
No, it does not. And a lot of times when I'm talking with clients in the office and going through that initial consultation and talking about how we're successful, one of the things that I say when I'm talking about the listings of impairment, frequently when I talk to them and I'll say, if you have this condition with these complications, then you're automatically considered disabled. I said, but these are these type of conditions. Chronic kidney disease and on dialysis is one that I usually use with the clients in cancers that can't be treated and are expected to result in death. And then I usually go in, you don't really want to meet the listings of impairment.
Yeah.
And I think that is a true statement from that standpoint, that most of these are conditions that you don't want to have. All of these conditions you don't want to have from that. But if you have these conditions and I can establish that you meet the listings of impairment, then that will allow me to write to the judge and hopefully get your case granted without having to have a hearing. It doesn't mean it will always work, but frequently when I can establish my clients meet the listings of impairment, I can write a letter to the judge. Among attorneys, we call it requesting an on-the-record decision, but and point out to the judge, if you look at these records here, which we've sent in, and they're in this exhibit and page numbers, the listings of impairment for chronic kidney disease is this. This is the citation for that. These are what's required. And my client has that. This record shows that, and he has these complications that are required, and these are the records that show that. If you look at this, I think you can grant this without a hearing. And frequently, when you do that, if the records do bear that out, frequently you will get a decision without having to have a hearing if the client meets these conditions.
And if the judge were to disagree, it just means you're going to go on through the formal process.
Correct.
It doesn't mean you're done.
It doesn't mean that you're denied at that point. You still get the hearing at a later time. The judge just says, I don't know that he quite meets the listings of impairment. I still want to have a hearing on this.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay, that makes sense. So continuing down the list, category number 7 are hematological disorders. So these are blood disorders, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That could be a lot of different things. But,
it can be. Anemia and other type of blood disorders come into play from that standpoint. And so those are, some people are very familiar with those disorders. And anemia can be a transient condition. It's something that I had when I was a child. I would have to take iron periodically because I had problems with anemia, but I grew out of it and don't have those issues anymore. But mine was never severe from that standpoint. So it wasn't, mine wasn't the point that if I got cut, I bled real bad or anything of that nature. It just, I had anemia issues. And so, that's not what we're talking about. It's much more severe than just the temporary type of issues that sometimes people have.
Okay. And then the 8th category is skin disorders, and the one that pops to mind would be chronic psoriasis. I mean, that seems to be one of them, but there are some others out there. There's a photosensitivity condition that I was unaware of, obviously.
Yes, it does reference a photosensitivity issue, which is not one I've ever seen either. And frankly, the skin ones have to be pretty severe. Psoriasis, certain types of psoriasis and in certain severe categories could potentially meet the listings of impairment. The photosensitivity disorders can as well. I've practiced law 32 years, Social Security cases for 32 years now, and I don't recall ever seeing anybody who had a skin disorder that met the listings of impairment that I've ever represented. I'm not
Right.
saying there's not some out there, obviously, because the listings are there. It's just not any condition that I've ever had to deal with, which is the reason why I didn't know about this photosensitivity until I was preparing for our podcast today, because I've never had to look at that listings of impairment before.
Okay. Category number 9 is endocrine disorders. So this would be dealing with the pancreas, and so diabetes or thyroid issues and other types of issues like that.
Yes, kind of like the thyroid is certainly included there. The diabetes. Basically, our bodies function with certain hormones that are released by different organs, and that's kind of what this is getting around to is hormonal type issues. The thyroid is not producing its hormone like it's supposed to. Then if it produces too much or doesn't produce enough, it affects your body significantly. Same with the pancreas and diabetes. Producing insulin or not producing insulin. And so those are the types of issues there, not just those two, but those are two examples of what comes into play under the endocrine disorders.
Yeah, I know sometimes we hear these words or these names of these categories, and I have no idea what that is. So it's nice to kind of be able to
Yes.
put something more specific in there. Category number 10, congenital disorders that affect multiple body systems.
And this is one that that's changed over the years. When I first started practicing, this had quite a few more things in it than it does now. I think this one has been limited, if I'm not mistaken, to where there's only one item listed, one condition listed now under this. All the others have been removed. Now they can still come into play in addressing other issues, and persons with those conditions can still be found disabled. But I think the only one actually left under the congenital disorders that affect multiple body systems is Down syndrome.
Okay, that makes sense. And then number 11 is neurological disorders, and this could be a wide range of issues.
This is a wide range. I mentioned earlier that spinal issues, and they were addressed in another. And the musculoskeletal is talking about spinal issues that more to the bone structures, the vertebra and the disc, and the nerves coming off of that. The neurological, if you have spinal cord injury, then that can come into play under the neurological. But I've frankly, this musculoskeletal, cardiovascular, and neurological disorders and mental disorders, which we'll get to, are the ones I see the most as far as listings of impairment, to be honest, around this area. But the seizure disorders.
So epilepsy, for instance.
Epilepsy is covered under the neurological disorders. Stroke, people who've had strokes can come under this one. Brain tumors and traumatic brain injuries both would fall under the neurological disorders.
Cerebral palsy comes in under this, ALS as well.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. ALS, cerebral palsy, all of those come in under this one. Muscular dystrophy comes in under this one. So this one has has more different items listed. One of the ones that has more of the different items listed that fall under this category than most of the other ones that we've talked about. Right. So.
Right. And then we'll progress to number 12, which is mental disorders. And this is a wider range of conditions or issues. But yeah, so mental disorders actually could qualify because they could prevent you from working a 40-hour work week.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. They can and often do qualify if the mental health issue is severe enough. Excuse me. It's not just there are a lot of people who have seasonal depression, and that's not what this is talking about. But there's people who have major depression, and that just nearly prevents them from functioning very well at all, even despite getting treatment for that. And so those type of issues, people with very severe anxiety, PTSD type conditions, a lot of mental health conditions that can come in And basically they're looking at a variety of different factors on how that affects you, how it affects you doing daily activities, how it affects you in interacting with other people, and going about your life, and all of those come into play in the Social Security understands. Frankly, I think Social Security Administration had a greater understanding of the severity of mental health issues in this country long before other segments of society understood that. Even frankly, even still today, a lot of times with health insurance, it does not provide the coverage for mental health issues like it does for physical health issues, even though the mental health issues can affect your quality of life very, very greatly.
Absolutely. So category number 13, we've got two left. So category 13 is dealing with cancer, malignant neoplastic diseases. Cancer is very prevalent, so it's nice to know that there is a category there that really focuses specifically on this range of conditions.
Yes.
Types of cancers.
Yeah, cancers can come into play from that standpoint. And then, depending on where the cancer is, you can look at other body parts as, other sections as well. So if you got lung cancer, it comes in under respiratory or the malignant disorders. So you've got different categories that you can look at from there. And hopefully your attorney's familiar enough to know, okay, doesn't fall under this, let's look at this other category to see if we can fall under that category. So you've got different areas you can look at for some of these conditions there, but cancers are fall under it, and frankly, these again change periodically. So one may be there this year, next year it be taken out, or a different one added in next year.
Maybe it's been moved around to a different category for some reason,
Correct.
Depending on what it is.
Exactly.
And then we'll wrap up with category number 14, which is an immune system disorder. And these can be very, very serious.
Yes. Yeah. Immune system disorders are very, very serious disorders that people have. And so you come in there and, autoimmune disorder conditions fall under this. AIDS would fall under this category. But, there's a whole variety of immune disorders that affect people. And, if you know anything about these, if your immune system is very weakened, getting out into a public setting, such as a workplace, exposes you to a lot of germs and a lot of diseases that that your system may not be able to fight off anymore. And so that all comes into play.
That makes sense. So that basically, in a nutshell, is that makes up the 14 categories under the listing of impairments for Social Security. Jeff, you said this as we were talking about the cancer, and I think it bears note that, hopefully your attorney knows that if it doesn't necessarily qualify here, it can go to a different category, or maybe there's a way to kind of work it into a different situation. And I think that's the benefit that you bring to this is you've got 32 years of experience handling these types of claims. I mean, so you've seen this stuff before, you've dealt with it, and you've spoken with other attorneys, obviously, who have run into these issues. And that's one of the things that I admire about you is you bring a wealth of knowledge to the table when you're engaging with that client, especially for the first time.
I do. I have been doing this for a long time. I don't know when this occurred, but I looked around at a local bar meeting. It's been a few years ago now. Unfortunately,
that was a group of lawyers, not a meeting at the bar.
Not at the bar. The local bar, local lawyer organization, bar organization, at one of our luncheons, and looked around and thought to myself, when did I become a senior member of the bar? And but after practicing 32 years, I am now considering myself to be a senior member of the bar. From there, but it's also provided me with a wealth of knowledge in the areas I practice. I limit my practice for a reason. In part of that, I don't want to be a jack of all trades, a master of none. I'm not arrogant enough that I'd say I'm a master of anything, but I know my limits, and so I limit myself to certain areas of law, try to do very good in those areas of law, and I'll let others handle other areas of law. From that standpoint, this is the area that I enjoy practicing. And Social Security is something that I've been doing since I first started practicing law back in fall of '92, and continue to do so. And it's just something that I enjoy.
And friends, this is a gentleman who just admitted on air, so to speak, that he enjoys dealing with the federal government on a daily basis. So it takes
I said I enjoy representing people.
It takes
a
special kind of individual. Once again, Jeff, why I admire you.
Yeah.
Well, my friend,
getting back to the point, you want an attorney who is familiar not only with, so if your condition doesn't fall under the neatly under the malignant disorder, but then it would fall under a different disorder, that they know to do that. But even if it doesn't meet any of the listings of impairment, that does not mean that you're still not disabled and we're not going to be successful in a Social Security disability claim. In fact, most of my cases that I handle that I am successful in, I'm not successful because my client meets the listings of impairment. I'm successful because the other avenue on being found disabled, which depending on age, it varies based on the age. If you're under 50 years of age, we got to establish essentially that you can't do an 8-hour day, 5-day-a-week job, and standards change at age 50 and again at age 55. But you're looking at age, education, past work experience, and the limitations placed on your activities at that point. Not do you have this condition with these complications there. Now, I'll look at both of those. If we can meet the listings of impairment, great, because a lot of times I can get those cases resolved quicker for my client and get them money coming into the household much sooner. But if we can't do that, we're also focusing on the other side of it and doing it at the same time. I'm looking for listings of impairment, but I'm also establishing the other aspects of the case all at the same time. So it's not one and then followed by the other. We're doing it so that when we're ready, when the judge sets a hearing, we're ready to hit the ground running at that point.
Absolutely. Now, Jeff, you had mentioned because Social Security is a federal program, you can actually handle these cases in all 50 states. But as it relates to, Kentucky, you actually have two offices. We're recording today here in Calloway County, in your office right down here by the town square. But you also have another office up in Christian County in Hopkinsville.
Correct. Yes. In fact, I had some meetings at that office this morning. So, yeah, I have two offices now, one here in Murray in Calloway County, which is my primary. That's my main office. I live in Calloway County, so Calloway County is going to be my main office there, but I do have the office in Christian County in Hopkinsville, where I meet with clients at as well. And, that allows me to have a little wider swath of people that I can represent. And it started, I started looking at Christian County and Hopkinsville because I had clients up in that area already and wanted to find a way to, instead of them driving down to me, if I got 3 or 4 clients up there, I can go meet 3 or 4 clients in one day. I'll take, and it's me driving that trip one time instead of 4 clients making the trip down here over that period of time. So I thought that, that would work out well for my clients up in that area. But it also opens up, people on the north side or on the other side of Hopkinsville from Calloway County would want to come to Murray, but they would want to meet. They'd be fine meeting in Hopkinsville, and that's proven to be true. I've gotten calls from people a little bit further away and I handle cases that we've talked about before. I handle workers' compensation, personal injury cases all over the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I've got cases going on now with clients in Louisville, Bowling Green, Lexington area, and I intend to continue to do that. But a lot of people like to have face-to-face meetings, and I can still have face-to-face meetings with those when I'm traveling. But Hopkinsville is just a little easier because we have more opportunity for face-to-face meetings there.
That makes perfect sense. And Jeff, as we close up the episode, the good news is, regardless of which state you're in when it comes to Social Security claims, whether you have a situation that may require you to meet in Hopkinsville or down here in Murray, there's really one primary phone number, right? If somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the easiest way for them to do that?
The best phone number to call is 270-753-0053, or the 800 number, which is 1-800-844-5108. Though it rings to the same phone, whether you dial the 270 or the 800 number, it rings to the same phone. You should have a live person answer, unless everybody's on the phone already when you call in. But 90% of the time, 90+% of the time, you're going to have a live person to answer if you're calling during business hours. If it's after business hours and you want to shoot me an email, you're welcome to send me an email at jeff@jeffrobertslaw.com as well. But also, if you call in after hours, we got voicemail, so you can leave me a voicemail as well.
Terrific. Jeff, I appreciate the information. I mean, this is complicated information, obviously, to try to get through in a half an hour, but I appreciate the fact that you kind of add some clarity to it, obviously, and kind of explain what this is and why it's so important to somebody who needs to file a Social Security claim. And I'm glad you understand it a lot better than I do.
Yeah, and I thought that would be a good topic to cover, just because I have people call up and say, well, I have this condition. Will that qualify for Social Security? It may or may not make the listings, but even if it's not something that's in the listings of impairment, it doesn't mean you don't qualify for Social Security. You just you may qualify under a different avenue.
Outstanding. Jeff, thanks again for your time, and to the listeners, thank you all for your time, and we'll be back here in about 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.